Hey guys, Sam here at NA Studios. Today I want to show you something on Cubase 11 where Steinberg have taken an already fantastic EQ and I've just changed everything. Let's jump in. Okay, so this is Frequency 2, which comes from the heritage of Frequency 1, or just Frequency, which already had some amazing features. As standard, we've got 8 bands. We can take any of these and we can make them peaks, high shelves, low shelves, notches. We can turn them all into mid-side and we can do some amazing things. So let's take a listen to a track as it stands now and let's just see the overall functionality, and then we're going to take a look at the newer features which have just blown my mind. So as standard, we've got a very capable EQ. I've got it here on the master bus and we're going to take a look at some of the functionality, some of the stereo versus mid-side functionality. Let's take a look at the low end in this track and we're going to use it in a normal stereo mode and increase some of the low end. Now currently I've got it set to peak, so I'm just going to take that to a low shelf and bring up some of the low end here. I can do this by dragging the node on the display, I can do it by turning the knobs, and I can also see as I turn the knobs that tells me what note I'm actually increasing. Now I know that this track was recorded in C sharp, so I'm going to go down to a C sharp, which is 70 Hertz, and I can increase that in the low end, so we're staying kind of in tune with the track. Cool, nice bit of bottom end. In the top end, I want to increase the high end in the guitars and the cymbals in the far left and right, but I don't want to do anything to the vocal. I think that's already bright enough. So we can go to band number 8, put it on high shelf, and let's take it from stereo into mid-side mode. And this means that we can alter the stuff that's in the middle, the vocal, the kick and the snare, separately from the stuff that's in the sides, so the guitars and the overheads. So I think that the mid channel is plenty bright enough. So I'm just going to go to this side channel, bring that up as a high shelf, and just add some more high end there. So we can do that just to the high end in the sides. Let's take a listen to that before and after. Okay, that's fantastic. But this stuff was there in Frequency 1, the original Frequency. What we've added in Frequency 2 are dynamic bands, and this opens up a whole new range of possibilities with an EQ. So a dynamic EQ allows you to EQ a certain band, but only when a certain threshold is reached. Similar to how in a compressor, you're only going to compress when that certain threshold is reached. It's kind of like a cross between the two, sort of like the threshold capabilities of a compressor, but then doing it in a frequency sense in an EQ. So we could use this to get rid of a problem area in the track if it becomes overpowering. So let's take a listen to our auto listen feature where we can zone in on just a certain frequency area, and let's find an area of this track that is overpowering, something maybe in the high mids that's getting a little too nasally. I'm going to go to band 4 for this. So let's say, for example, that was a frequency area that we wanted to take out. Well, we can do that. We can just use a regular EQ to notch that out. But in dynamic band, as I said, we can just take it out when it reaches a certain threshold, when it becomes too much of a problem. You could do this for de-essing. You could do this for any kind of resonant frequencies in an instrument that are becoming a problem. And we can do that by turning on the dynamic section. So when that dynamic section is on, it will decrease that frequency area dynamically, depending on the source material. You can see that the line is no longer static, it moves relative to what's coming in. But there's more. Let's go into single mode. Previously we were on multi-mode where we can see all the bands. In single mode you can dive far deeper into this dynamic feature. We've got a set threshold that we can set for that band, so we can adjust at which point it turns down that frequency. The human condition lies battered on the floor. I'm already So we can set a higher threshold so it's not affecting everything all the time. But this is where things get really interesting. And this is where we can adjust the sidechain. We can adjust what it's actually listening to. At the moment, it's listening to internal, so it's just listening to the track. But we can tell it to listen to another channel in our mix and affect this track depending on that other channel. I think it's most useful when we're looking at guitars and vocals and snare and how they react with each other, bearing in mind that they're all in that kind of mid-range frequency area. So before we go too much further, let's talk about sidechains for a second. We can activate the sidechain on a plugin in Cubase by clicking this button. Once we do that, we can activate a send on another channel and feed that channel into the plugin. That means that the channel we've got the plugin on can be affected by the channel coming into the sidechain. Once you get your head around that, it allows you to open up so many more possibilities within your DAW and allow one channel to affect another in a frequency or dynamic sense. Back to it. So I've got frequency on the guitar track now, and I've fed some stuff into the sidechains, the external sidechains. If I go to my single view, I can see exactly what that is. So band number 6, this is this whacking great cut here. This is listening to sidechain 1. And what I've sent to that is the vocal. So over on the vocal, on my send section, I've sent this to band number 8 on frequency. You can send this to any band, you can send it to multiple bands on multiple sends, but this is what I'm doing for now. So the vocal is going into the sidechain number 8 of frequency, which is on the guitars. And to have 8 external sidechains in one plugin is just unbelievable. This is built upon the whole VST3 architecture, and this means that we've got so much more creative control over our mix. So I've got the vocal going into number 8 on my guitar. And this means that I can tell the frequency plugin on the guitars to listen to my vocal and only dynamically EQ a band when that vocal is present. Let's take a listen before this has been done and then after. And what I'm doing here is ducking down some of the high mid frequencies in the guitar to leave room for the vocal. As it stands, you'll hear that there's quite a lot of information in those high mids, even when the vocal is there. So the vocal is having trouble cutting through. But when I add this dynamic band, it's taking out some of that high mid frequency in the guitar when the vocal is present. So on band number 8, I've got it bypassed at the moment, just so we can hear what it's like before. But it's set to sidechain number 8, which is coming from the vocal. Let's take a listen to how it sounds before and then after.
The human condition lies battered on the floor. What's worth dying for? You know I've heard it all before. The human condition lies battered on the floor.
So you can hear that it really gets out of the way when that vocal comes in. When I take the plugin off, it's so obvious there's frequency masking going on there. There's 2 instruments that are occupying that same frequency space, the high mids. The guitars and the vocals are both fighting for space there. But it means I can duck that area in the guitars when the vocal is present. And then once the vocal is no longer present, it gets out the way. The EQ stops being applied and we hear all those high mids in the guitar again. This is such an important part of mixing, this frequency masking. If you've got 2 instruments or more than 2 instruments occupying the same space, you're not going to be able to hear them as well as you should. So I've got the snare set up going into sidechain number 1 into the frequency plugin. So I've got 2 sidechains feeding into the same plugin so that I can affect the frequency balance of the guitar depending on 2 external sources. This is just such an amazing thing to be able to do, and the fact that you've got 8 on each plugin just opens up so many possibilities. Let's take a listen to this now, where I've got the same sidechain input with the vocals and the guitar. That's still happening, but I've also got it happening from the snare. So the guitars are being ducked at around 5 kilohertz when the snare sounds, just so it jumps out the way to allow that snare to punch through straight away.
The human condition lies battered on the floor. What's worth dying for? You know I've heard it all before.
It just allows the snare to poke through for a moment and that's relative to our attack and release controls, which we also have on this EQ. We can adjust the attack, we can adjust the release, we can adjust the ratio, so we can make it so that it brings down that frequency range by a lot or not quite so much. We can be heavy-handed or we can be gentle, depending on what we're doing. In this kind of scenario, if we're trying to get this snare to poke through, we're probably going to be quite aggressive. Whereas if we were doing something like de-essing, then we'd maybe be a little gentler. But the possibilities of this are endless. You can have 8 sidechain inputs into each plugin and have 8 things controlling the EQ on your set instrument or on your master. You can put this frequency plugin on your master and have the master being affected by the individual instruments coming in, which just opens up so many possibilities. Thanks for checking it out. Cubase 11 is such a fully featured DAW. There are so many possibilities in there, and Frequency 2 is just the icing on the cake. It adds such great functionality, and it's going to completely change the way that I personally mix within this program. Make sure you click like, make sure you subscribe. See you again soon. Take care.